You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Ask Drone U. This is this week's news episode, and joining me today is Mr. Haya Costello from Drone DJ, which is constantly spinning the drone news. Haya, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to this weekly update of all the drone news as always.
Yeah, there is a significant amount of updates from last week to this week, with the whole hobbyist recreational flying rules changing from the FAA. That was huge. And then the release of the DAC, the Drone Advisory Committee, was huge as well, which showcases the leadership. This committee is supposed to essentially give advice to the FAA to make major decisions on how the industry should be regulated as a whole. But also this week, Haya, we had a lot of news, again, where the DJI security breach comes to fruition one more time. And it's really interesting how this is having an effect on the trade war and the industry as a whole, as it seems it might just be more dramatic than it really is. In other news, we also have, it looks like AirSense is coming to all drones, and on top of that, there is a new SDK release from the Smart Remote, which would actually make it very useful. So really excited to go through this week's drone news. Haya, what is the first story that you want to go over this week?
Yeah, let's start with DJI and the warning that DJI might be stealing your data from your drone and sending it to China. As a result of the DHS statement earlier in the week, where the company Huawei is basically banned from doing business with any US company, it seems now that DJI is getting sucked into the same escalating trade war between China and the United States. Again, people have been warned, and this was actually picked up by pretty much all the major news outlets, that supposedly DJI is stealing your data, capturing it from your drone, and then sharing it with DJI in China, and then effectively with the Chinese government. Now, if you remember last year, there was the Kifu report that was issued by DJI. They hired an independent company to do the report and to investigate and look and see how DJI is managing and securing and handling all their data that they get from the drones. To no surprise, that report said that DJI wasn't really doing anything wrong. There were a few recommendations as to how DJI could further improve data security, but there was no evidence of DJI doing any harm, which of course is no surprise because the company that's paying for the report is DJI itself. Now, we're now almost a year later, and the same rumors come back again that DJI might be stealing your data. It's hard to know for sure. What DJI did say, though, is that if you do want to make sure that no data leaves your drone ever, then of course there are a few ways to go about it. I mean, for commercial drones, you can switch in a special mode that makes sure that the data stays on your drone. And if you fly a regular consumer drone, you can switch your tablet or your smartphone to airplane mode, and by doing so, cut off basically all communication to the internet as you're flying your drone. So there are a few workarounds and ways to make sure that your data is safe. But the real issue, of course, here is that these rumors keep coming back, and they do affect DJI's reputation. And I wouldn't be surprised if some local or state agencies are hesitant or maybe not even moving forward with purchasing DJI drones. And if that happens, then that will be quite a blow to DJI's business in the United States.
It would be quite a blow, and I just want to say really quick, who all is this affecting? Because there is a new ban against DJI in DoD airspace or on military bases. So this is affecting some drone pilots, although it is in mostly rare cases. Now, that being said, Haya, you brought up a very interesting point. This is essentially a federal issue. This is, again, an issue where some DJI drones are not allowed to fly on base or in DoD airspace. But there are workarounds for that are not even offered by DJI, and I think some people are familiar with that. The key issue here is, will this federal ban trickle down into state and local authorities, state and local governments? Because if they do, like you said, it could have a significant significant issue with people who are flying commercially for state and local entities. That being said, Haya, what are we seeing here in the Drone U community? We have had some members who are flying in DoD airspace who have had an issue, and they are currently looking for some sort of alternative. But I would say, Haya, in 97% of the cases, this is really not affecting people.
I would agree. I think in most cases it's not. It's just annoying that it keeps coming back up. And of course, DJI being the supplier of most of the drones that both consumers as well as commercial drone pilots operate. It could be a major blow to their brand image. It could be a major blow to the drone industry in general, and also just to all the ways that people are using drones. I mean, if fire departments, police departments, or search and rescue workers now start shying away from DJI products or are not even able or allowed to use DJI products, then it's going to affect the number of people that we can save with the use of drones, for instance. So it's not a good thing at all. You can argue whether it's also politically motivated. I'm not sure if that's something we need to go into here, but it's definitely not a good thing for the drone industry in general, since DJI is such a large player.
Well, I think you really nailed it on the head there, Haya. And I know you said we may not want to talk about how it's politically motivated, but I think it's 100% politically motivated, because I believe that this news came out of the new executive order from mid last week that came out from the administration. And then a lot of that was walked back very quickly. So this could just be a factor of the trade war. And I think the proof is in the pudding, Haya, because we're already seeing prices being raised on some DJI products. So I think like I said, proof is in the pudding. And we are seeing this evolve as a whole. The question is actually two questions really quick. You mentioned that there was a third-party company that had tested whether there were security issues. Yeah. But there is other information out there. There was another test done by a third-party individual for DJI's bug bounty program. Did they actually find security flaws in that particular or any particular piece of evidence?
Because now you're talking about Kevin Finisterre, right? I mean, but that goes back to 2016 and 17 even. That goes quite a bit back. I mean, I would imagine, and DJI said that most of those concerns were addressed immediately. So I don't think those would still be an issue. I hope not, at least, because DJI came out, if I'm not mistaken, pretty quickly after that with a firmware update to resolve some of those issues. So I don't think those would be still into play.
Yeah, that I just wanted to clarify for the community as a whole to hear what's going on out there. Well, moving on to the next piece of news for this week, it seems like the FAA is very adamantly listening to drone service providers when it comes to the advice they seek from the Drone Advisory Committee. What do you have on this story?
Yeah, the Drone Advisory Committee, there are 12 new members. So the Drone Advisory Committee currently consists of 35 people. 12 of them are brand new to the committee, and it's being led now by Michael Chasen, who you might know from Precision Hawk. The funny thing, though, is, and I'm looking at the list of members right now here on the FAA website, and I'll link to that in the article on Drone DJ. If you look at actually who is part of this Drone Advisory Committee, you'll see names from big corporations, or at least very well-funded drone industry startups. And what I wonder, and what I know is on your mind as well, is where are the regular commercial drone pilots, the ones that are part of their own operation or represent a small or medium-sized business? Where are those people on this drone advisory board, and why do we only see names from departments, from insurance companies, from large airplane manufacturers, from Project Wing, for instance? It seems that the regular drone or the regular commercial drone pilot is really not represented on this committee, and I think that is a bit of a problem.
I think a bit of a problem is quite the understatement, but very eloquently said there, Haya. I have to say, I am very troubled by the admission of these new members. As like you said, there are very few members that actually have flying experience as Part 107 pilots, as drone pilots, drone service providers. The people that actually give other people's services with drones. They're out there in the field. They're being shot at by different Americans. They understand the nuances of working in the field and understand that some of the things that are said at higher levels do have a trickle-down effect and do affect the work that they do. So it's extremely troubling that the FAA, which seeks advice from the Drone Advisory Committee on making new rules and regulations and how to do them, did not actually hire or utilize any experienced Part 107 pilots who, quote unquote, live the drone life. Now, I will say it's really interesting some of the people that they did choose, because Garmin, of all people, is here as a UAS hardware component manufacturer. I've yet to see any Garmin products on any drones. That being said, it's also extremely interesting. There are UAS, quote unquote, operators that are mentioned here, but Todd Grates, BNSF Railroad, I believe, is a Part 61 pilot, IFR rated. And if I understand it correctly, it's really interesting, again, that we really don't have anyone to represent the drone industry as a whole. You said it. There's a lot of executives here. There's a lot of people that, you know, if you look at these people and if you look at who the FAA chose, there's two common parallels going on that help paint a better picture of what was on the mind of the FAA when they chose these. Number one, the future of regulations. If you look at these names, look at how many people are affiliated with remote ID, universal traffic management, or have some sort of piece in the puzzle or skin in the game for those two particular areas of future regulation. But in addition, look at the names and look at the people from last year's FAA symposium on people who have been paying significant amounts of money to help get data and information for the FAA to make better decisions. So it does raise some eyeballs. It's going to give one hairy eyeball from me. In addition, there were a couple of drone service providers who did apply. Kenji I believe he is from the state of Oregon. In addition to that, our own Vic Moss from Drone U did apply as well because, well, we thought he would be a great advocate for drone service providers as a whole. He flies every day. He's in the industry every day. He's talking with the FAA all the time. So, you know, this whole DAC issue is significant because we want to see drone service providers providing or at least giving information to the FAA. We want to see that consideration from the FAA that they do actually care. So soon we'll be releasing a new article which gives information to drone pilots to reach out to their congressional members. This way, the representatives of Congress can push the FAA and the Department of Transportation to actually have some sort of representation for drone pilots as a whole. It's very ironic to me, Haya, that the FAA would actually choose to not have any drone service providers on this drone advisory committee, because doesn't the committee represent the interests of the industry as a whole, and yet there's no drone pilots on it?
It should, and it makes you wonder as well. I mean, if you look at all these corporations, of course, they all have a stake in the drone industry and they have an agenda in the drone industry. And now you have the government and those large aircraft manufacturers and drone industry players, in a committee together where basically they're able to adjust the agenda and align their agendas. And it's very concerning that commercial drone pilots are not a big part of this committee as well. I mean, there should be, if you got 35 members, I would argue that at least a quarter up to half of them should probably be commercial drone pilots and not from some big industry player.
Well, the Beltway Bandits have won here, Haya, and that is going to help us segue into the next piece of news, which is actually quite significant. Now, I just want to say a lot of people are going to be probably saying, Haya, you know, this is a lot of drone news centered around DJI this week, and we wanted to make sure that we know that, and we're not trying to, showcase a fanboydom to DJI, but as the largest player in the industry for manufacturing as a whole, it's kind of hard to ignore them. That being said, Haya, it looks like DJI is taking extra steps right now for the continuance of drones integration into the national airspace. What do you have?
Yeah, earlier this week I was invited to come to a presentation from DJI that took place in Washington, and they were announcing new measures and new recommendations to keep the airspace safe, especially when it comes, of course, to unmanned and manned air traffic. Now, The articles and also the entire presentation you can find on our YouTube channel from Drone DJ and on our site. So I'm not going to go into all the details. Basically, the biggest part of DJI's announcement is that as of January 1st, 2020, so next year, all their consumer and professional drones, so any drone over 250 grams, is now going to have onboard ADSB to receivers to be able to receive the signals from helicopters and airplanes. What DJI found is that, and to DJI's credit, they have been very proactive in coming up with different solutions to increase the safety around drones. So think, for instance, the return to home functionality, but also geofencing, for which I think they have had 3 iterations now. So at some point, DJI is looking at their product line and said, okay, so what can we do from this point onwards to make things even safer still? And that's when they decided to install ADSB receivers on all their drones over 250 grams as of next year going forward. I think that's a major step. It's going to make their drones, of course, heavier. It's going to create some design complications because now you have to have more components on board of those drones. It's probably going to make their drones slightly more expensive as well, but it will mean that anybody flying any of those newer DJI drones is going to be able, or is going to receive warnings anytime a helicopter or an airplane is anywhere in the vicinity of you flying your drone. And that's a huge improvement because, of course, a lot of times, as we've seen on some of those YouTube videos, helicopters even, and also, of course, airplanes, they come at you so fast. And if your drone is at some distance, even within a visual line of sight, you may not even hear or see that other aircraft approaching. Remember those 2 videos where we had one helicopter over Hollywood in Florida and the other one was here in New York, close to Niagara Falls? Those helicopters have seemed to appear out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you have a serious situation. ADSB is going to allow you to get warnings whenever any of those other aircrafts are in your vicinity. And also, as of 2020, the FAA requires, I believe, all aircraft, manned aircraft, to have that equipment on board so they can actually broadcast those signals. So I think this would be a major step forward in making the sky safer. Now, during this meeting, DJI even suggested other measures as well to increase air safety, and they were asking for other industry players to be more proactive and to join them in this effort, as well as governments around the world as well. I mean, of course, this is not something that's just limited to the American airspace. You have similar issues in Europe and Asia as well. So this is something that needs to be addressed in a global way. I think that what DJI is doing is smart. I mean, being the biggest drone supplier for consumers and commercial operators, I think they have a responsibility to help and make the airspace safer. And yeah, they're making a big effort in trying to achieve that goal. So I do applaud them for that.
You have to apply them for that, Haya. It's, it is really interesting. I've heard a lot of people who are not for ADSB say, this is simply an operation that can't scale because we'll be blacking out, the ADSB map if drones are, all having ADSB. But if I understand this correctly, this is actually an ADSB receiver, not a transmitter. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. After the presentation from DJI, they had a panel discussion, and one of the members of the panel said, if you were to reverse it, where all the manned aircraft are now going to get signals from all the drones, that would be totally unworkable. That would not be the way to go. So the way this is going to work is you as a drone operator are able to receive signals from manned aircraft, so helicopters and airplanes. So if any of those aircraft is in your area and so close that DJI deems it to be unsafe, you will get a warning to at least give right away and bring your drone down. I'm not sure if you don't respond to that, DJI is going to force you to land your drone. That might be the case. That's something we will have to look into.
Yeah, that would be really important information because that could actually cause more problems. But I will say for all the, all the naysayers out there, they say that, this may not be something that can essentially scale in the future as we get more and more drones in the air. But from what I've been told, that it's kind of the first step and they're not expecting this to be a future solution forever, just kind of a short-term part of the system to help, again, further integration. Well, as we move on to further news this week, it's really interesting because the smart controller has kind of been in the news for quite a bit. And, it's funny because there's another piece of news right after this where we talk about the Mavic 2 Pro hack. And someone asked me, well, does does the hack work on the smart remote? And I believe it does, but let's get into what's going on with the smart controller. Hi, I know a lot of people, at least from the Drone U community, are really excited about this particular piece of news. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so the smart controller. So this is actually a great example because this also ties back to the trade war between China and the US. The smart controller already wasn't an inexpensive device. It was priced at $649, and people already were saying this is way too expensive for a controller. That price has since gone up to $749. So it's yet more expensive, and that's purely driven by the increase in tariffs. So that's the first piece of news. The second thing is that this smart controller is going to be a crucial part in DJI's future drone program. And right now it's for the DJI Mavic 2. But for instance, it allows you to switch from one drone to the next. So let's say you have a larger team of drone operators, you have multiple drones, probably multiple controllers as well. It's going to allow you to manage those drones and switch from one to the other much more quickly than you could do in the past. Now, there's more to the controller. What happened last week is DJI quietly released their SDK program for the smart controller. So this now means that third-party developers can actually create or adjust their apps and make them run on the smart controller. One of us reached out to Litchi, one of those third-party apps, and they did confirm that they received access to the smart controller through the SDK program, and they are already testing and working on a version of Litchi that will actually run directly from the smart controller. So from having a controller with your phone or your tablet, you're soon going to be able to use the DJI Smart Controller and run third-party apps, or in case of larger enterprise customers, of course, develop your own apps that are fully integrated in the Smart Controller. I think for serious commercial operators or larger enterprises, the $749 price tag on this device is not really an issue. I think for them it's a no-brainer to upgrade. For hobbyists and for smaller commercial operators who may fly one or two drones, it's still going to be an expensive device. However, the utility is going to increase. And with the brighter screen and everything built into one device rather than having a controller and a tablet or a controller and a smartphone, I still think this makes for a pretty nice kit of hardware.
I definitely think it helps, especially if you are running multiple Mavics. But Litchi is one of those programs that's utilized from investigators to just average Joes like myself who like to have added features for their drones and limited interruptions from other suppliers. So frankly, this is really exciting news. And for one of our last pieces of news, talking about modifications and whatnot, I recently came out with a new Mavic 2 Pro hack. And I'm sure you're familiar with the importance of attitude mode. Do you fly attitude mode yourself?
Not very often. I mean, most of the times I'm writing news articles, and that kind of takes away from the flying, unfortunately. But I know for people like in your business, Atti Mode is pretty important. And talking about added value and adding features to your hardware, like with the smart controller, I think what you've been able to do with the DJI Mavic 2 is pretty smart as well. So tell us how it works and how our listeners can upgrade their drone as well.
So if you fly a Mavic 2 Pro or a Mavic 2 Zoom, then you're going to love this hack, because what you can do is you can change any of the flight modes on your controller to actually utilize attitude mode. And it's something that will work so well that even when you switch into the flight mode, your screen will display attitude mode and no positioning control will be utilized. If you're not familiar with attitude mode, it's a really, really awesome feature if you're ever trying to get smooth video motions or cinematic motions, because when you let off the sticks in attitude mode, the drone just continues to float. Frankly, this is a really useful tool, especially if you're in an area with high wind variances, like here in the mountains of Colorado or New Mexico. You can get high variances in wind. So, it may be 10 miles an hour of wind on the ground, but it could be 100 miles an hour, 300 or 400 feet up. And if you're trying to run a mapping mission, it's going to be really important to know just how intense the wind is at those altitudes. So with attitude mode, we can essentially take off and go to varying altitudes and just let the drone float and let the wind push the drone and get a very accurate reading of exactly what that wind is. So it's a great micro meteorology tool. On top of, it's a safety feature as well. If you've ever had a flyaway or if you've ever had essentially a third-party app that's just going haywire and sending your drone to places it's not supposed to go, you can always cancel a third-party app or cancel a flyaway by switching your drone into Attitude Mode. So I actually think this is a hack that increases the safety of your drone and increases the functionality of the drone as well. So you can check that out. I launched that video yesterday, and it is on the Drone DJ site. And it's just, if you're a professional pilot, I think this is just something that you're going to want to have.
I would totally agree. I just hope that the difference between the wind on the ground and up there is not as big as you just used in the example. It was 100 miles an hour wind. I think your drone will be sideswiped.
Hey, if you live in the Southwest, this is a very real problem. So, or if you live in the mountains, again, it's a very real problem. So
and you're right that winds can be very different at different altitudes and also go in different directions. So it's definitely something to be aware of for sure.
Well, many balloon pilots are familiar with what's called the Ryan-Carlton effect, which essentially says that wind speeds are different at varying elevations. So for balloon pilots, I've actually seen this a lot. They're like, "Can I use my drone to measure the wind?" So it's really interesting that more advanced pilots are familiar with this and more novice pilots are not. But hey, once you learn about Attitude Mode, it's a really powerful feature, especially for subject tracking. But anyway, Haya, what else do you have for us this week as we wrap up this week's news show? Because there's so much.
I want to talk with you a little bit about the drone rules for hobbyist drone pilots and how they're no longer able to fly in controlled airspace since we are not having lands available to hobbyist drone pilots. Last time we spoke about this, we spoke about how people might not follow these rules. And I think you ran a quick survey on Instagram, didn't you, the other day?
I did actually run a quick survey on Instagram. Here it is. This is on Instagram. We showcase that, the de facto ban on hobby rules. What would the hobbyists think of these rules? So I said, I ran just an easy poll. Will hobbyist pilots comply? And you can see here on screen that 75% of the people who responded, which was about 534 people, 75% said no. And I actually got a lot of messages about this, and they were saying, it's simply non-compliance because how are these people being educated that there are new rules as a whole?
Exactly. And that's exactly the point I was going to get at is I bet you a lot of those people aren't even aware of the rules or the changes in these rules. So if you just look at people who are aware of the rules and then say, okay, I'm not going to follow them, knowingly, I'm not going to follow these rules and the changes. But I think for most hobbyist drone pilots, they may not even know these rules and the changes that just took place. I mean, if they took that knowledge test some time ago, the DJI one, for instance, they may just think that everything is still fine and they may just fly their drones.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this all pans out. We're looking forward to hearing from the FAA on a podcast coming up next week, direct and live from the FAA symposium, where we're going to get some answers to these questions, because I think it's fair to say, Haya, we all want safe skies. It's just about, how we do things is just as important as what we do. And boy, am I learning that the hard way, Haya. So thank you.
No, but I mean, in this case, I understand that the FAA as a government organization may not be able to move and create rules as fast as you would like them to. But to come up with rules and then enforce people to use a system that you don't have available for them yet, that does create a problem. And I hope the FAA is able to make lands available to hobbyist drone pilots very, very soon, because then at least everybody can fly and stay within the rules rather than flying and breaking the rules at the same time.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how the drone rules for hobbyists have flown. The FAA expects them, if you're going to fly in controlled airspace, you've got to use LANCs. And it's not available, which is essentially like a de facto ban. So it's fascinating how all of this is going down. Well, Haya, I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show to discuss this week's drone news. You always have so much information and so much value, and I know everyone appreciates it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. I always appreciate it. And it's good to have these kind of conversations. And I'm looking forward to our show next week.
I am as well, Haya. Well, thank you so much for joining us as usual. That's going to do it for us today. If you have a question, go to askdroneu.com and stay on top of this week's more and continued drone news at dronedj.com. But that is going to do it for us today. My name is Paul. His name is Haya. You heard that right. It's Haya. All right, that's going to do it for us today. You're listening to another friendly episode of Ask Drone U.